lure vulnerable children into running drugs, youth groups say they're trying to steer those same children away from trouble with tuppence. They're calling on the government to release what they say is a long-delayed £500 million youth investment fund and work out a strategy to help youngsters with all sorts of struggles, many of which have worsened during the pandemic. 2009, Berkshire Youth had a budget of £1.1 million. It's now £400,000. 2009, the charity worked with 114 organisations. Now it's just 26. Our Home Affairs' Nikki Mitchell reports.
How's your schoolwork going?
The life lessons are complicated, but I'm getting used to them.
I'm still going to school. I'm getting on fine to school.
Lockdown Virtual Youth Club, covering everything from how to get a good night's sleep to the dangers of knife crime. Most of the cost of running the ways in Bracknell is covered by the local council, but there's never enough money to help everyone in need.
Every day my phone's going crazy with people texting and you're just checking in, and it might be you work with someone on a Wednesday evening, but actually they need the support on a Monday after school. But there's definitely a large proportion of young people that we've not been working with that we haven't been able to, and it's a real juggling act. We're just always looking for money to do it.
The ways has motivated me to get back into exercising again.
Helped figure out how to reduce my stress and just pretty much put me back on my feet so I could be able to do what I needed to do in school.
I got a bit down, but the ways has kind of helped me become more motivated. I'm doing all my work now. I'm happy.
Most of the thousands of youngsters supported by youth workers across Berkshire are from the county's most deprived areas, and the pandemic has plunged many further into poverty.
People assume because we're in Berkshire, everybody's got enough of everything.
In Newbury, the man who runs Berkshire Youth gave me a virtual tour of the Waterside Centre.
We think the building could probably accommodate a good probably 200 young people through the day.
It's one of many youth centres across the south forced to close over the last decade. The charity has taken out a huge loan to refurbish and reopen it.
But the reason the Waterside is derelict like this and we're having to spend so much money to try and get it back into shape is because there's been no investment in young people for so long. It's all been just decimated across the country.
Berkshire Youth is currently working with almost 400 children at risk of being exploited by drug gangs. The funding runs out in March, but David's begging and borrowing to keep it going, pointing out that preventative youth work is much cheaper than the cost of youngsters ending up in court or prison.
These young people are vulnerable young people. They're being targeted because they're isolated. They're being targeted because they're lonely, and nobody really is paying a great deal of attention to them. And that's our job really with our average workers, is to try and engage with those young people. And the importance of that is to have a long-term relationship with them. And because long-term funding is never there, it's only there for a few months. We're trying to stay ahead of criminal activity and criminal gangs with tuppence. And criminal organisations have numerous sources of cash. It's just unbelievable there is no strategy.
The government believes there is, insisting £30 million capital from its manifesto-pledged youth investment fund will be spent this year on safe spaces for youngsters. In addition, a spokesperson said, "We recognise the vital role youth services play. We recently announced a £16.5 million emergency fund that builds upon another £60 million to support voluntary and community sector youth organisations through the pandemic, and £200 million for initiatives helping young people at risk of serious violence." The National Youth Agency says the government's confusing the picture by referencing general funding with strings attached. Back in Bracknell, what would these youngsters do without their youth workers?
I'll be having my bedroom if I never had the support from the ways.
Having each other there and speaking to each other is more important than ever, especially during these times.
So you'll be in teams next week.
Nikki Mitchell, BBC South Today.
Stay with us.